In autumn 1775, King George III was furious. The American colonies had rebelled, fighting British troops at Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill. He declared the colonies in open rebellion, refusing to negotiate. Britain began preparing a massive military response. Thousands of soldiers and warships would cross the Atlantic to crush the uprising. The plan: seize key cities like Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, and isolate rebellious New England. British leaders believed many colonists were still loyal and would support the crown. Quebec, controlling the St. Lawrence River, was vital. If lost, British control in North America would be threatened. Orders went to Governor Guy Carleton: fortify Quebec and prepare for attack. Carleton, with few British regulars, recruited local militia, but many French Canadians were reluctant to fight for their former conquerors. He repaired Quebec's stone walls and stockpiled food and ammunition, bracing for a harsh winter and possible siege. The city's defenses were strengthened, but Carleton knew the odds were daunting. Britain's message was clear: rebellion would be met with overwhelming force. The fate of Quebec would soon become a turning point in the struggle for North America. The king's anger set the stage for a brutal conflict. The world watched as Britain prepared for war. As Britain readied its armies, the American colonies organized for war. The Second Continental Congress formed the Continental Army, naming George Washington as commander-in-chief. They feared a British invasion from Canada that could split the colonies. To prevent this, Congress decided on a bold move: invade Canada first. The plan was risky. The Continental Army was inexperienced and poorly supplied. But if successful, they could secure their northern border and perhaps even persuade Canada to join their cause. Two forces were created, one under General Richard Montgomery, the other under Colonel Benedict Arnold. Montgomery, a respected former British officer, would lead the main force north from New York. Arnold, known for his determination, would take a second force through the wilderness of Maine. Their mission: defeat the British in Canada and win over the Canadian people. The American campaign would test their resolve and shape the future of the Revolution. The stakes were high, and the journey ahead would be grueling. The fate of the northern frontier hung in the balance. American leaders hoped Canadians would welcome them as liberators. Most in Quebec were French-speaking Catholics, recently conquered by Britain. Congress sent messages promising freedom and self-government. But the Quebec Act of 1774 had secured religious rights for French Canadians, making British rule more tolerable. Many preferred stability under Britain to the uncertainty of rebellion. Governor Carleton, respected by local leaders and clergy, worked to keep their loyalty. The Catholic Church and landowners urged neutrality or support for Britain. When the Americans arrived, few Canadians joined them. Most just wanted peace. The lack of local support left the American invaders isolated and vulnerable. Their dream of a 14th colony quickly faded. The invasion advanced on two fronts. Montgomery's force moved north from New York, capturing Fort Chambly and Fort St. John's after grueling marches and short sieges. These victories opened the way to Montreal, which fell without a fight as Carleton retreated to Quebec. Montgomery's men pressed on, knowing Quebec was the real prize. Meanwhile, Arnold led 1,100 men through Maine's wilderness, a journey plagued by starvation, disease, and brutal weather. Poor maps and broken boats cost them supplies. Only about 600 ragged survivors reached the St. Lawrence River. Their arrival shocked the British defenders. Arnold's men, exhausted but determined, waited for Montgomery on the plains of Abraham. The two American forces, battered but united, prepared for the final assault on Quebec. The city's walls loomed ahead, promising one last, desperate challenge. The fate of the campaign would be decided in the snow and stone of Quebec. The Americans faced their greatest test yet. Winter was closing in, and time was running out. The siege of Quebec was about to begin. The outcome would shape the future of the Revolution. In December, Montgomery and Arnold's combined force, about 1,000 men, camped outside Quebec's walls. The Canadian winter was brutal. Soldiers lacked coats, boots, and blankets. Disease, especially smallpox, spread rapidly. Many enlistments would expire at year's end, forcing Montgomery to act quickly. He demanded Carleton's surrender, but the governor refused. Inside, Carleton commanded 1,800 defenders, British regulars, sailors, and militia, well supplied and determined. The city's stone walls and cannons made a direct assault nearly impossible. Montgomery realized a surprise attack was his only hope. He and Arnold planned to strike during a snowstorm, hoping to catch the defenders off guard. The plan was risky, but delay meant disaster. With time and weather against them, the Americans prepared for a desperate gamble. The fate of the invasion would be decided in a single, daring assault. The city waited, tense and ready. The final battle was at hand. Quebec was a fortress, upper town perched on a cliff, surrounded by thick walls and bastions. The lower town at the river's edge was more vulnerable, but protected by barricades and cannons. Carleton concentrated his best troops in the lower town, expecting an attack there. The British felt secure behind their defenses, confident the Americans would fail. The Americans, with few cannons, knew they couldn't breach the walls. Their only chance, a surprise assault through the lower town, attacking from two directions. Montgomery and Arnold hoped to create chaos, break through the barricades, and force a surrender. The plan was bold, but the odds were long. The city's defenses were formidable, and the winter was unforgiving. The Americans prepared for a fight that would decide the fate of their northern campaign. On December 31st, 1775, a blizzard gave cover for the American assault. Montgomery led his men along the riverbank. Arnold attacked from the north. Montgomery's column was spotted at the first barricade. He was killed instantly by a volley of fire. Leaderless, his men panicked and retreated. Arnold's force pushed through the St. Roch suburb, but Arnold was wounded early. Captain Daniel Morgan took command, leading a fierce fight through the narrow streets. For a moment, success seemed possible. But with Montgomery's attack failed, Carleton focused all defenders on Morgan's men. Surrounded and outnumbered, the Americans fought bravely, but were forced to surrender at dawn. The Battle of Quebec ended in disaster for the Americans. The dream of capturing Quebec and of a 14th colony was shattered in the snow. The American army was broken, and their leaders lost. The British had held their fortress. The Revolution's northern gamble had failed. The failed assault was a crushing blow. Over 60 Americans were killed or wounded, including Montgomery. More than 400 were captured. The British suffered few losses. Carleton's defense was a triumph. The victory boosted Loyalist morale in Canada and proved the strength of British fortifications. For the Americans, the defeat meant starvation, disease, and despair through the winter. The hope of Canada joining the Revolution was gone. Most French Canadians, seeing the American weakness, chose neutrality or loyalty to Britain. The campaign's failure ensured Canada would remain separate from the United States. The defeat at Quebec marked the end of American ambitions in the North. The Revolution would continue, but without a 14th colony. The defeat at Quebec forced a grim reckoning. In spring 1776, British reinforcements arrived, and the battered Americans retreated from Canada. The campaign had cost lives, resources, and hope for a quick victory. The loss made clear that the war would be long and hard. The King's rejection of peace and the defeat in Canada convinced many Americans that reconciliation was impossible. Calls for independence grew louder. Thomas Paine's common sense argued for a complete break from Britain. The failed invasion closed the door on compromise and expansion. Americans now faced a stark choice: submit or fight for a new nation. Just months after Quebec, the Declaration of Independence was signed. The Revolution's course and the fate of a continent was forever changed.